This new report changes everything we thought about the next NHL season. As multiple teams are taking significant steps forward, we're going to break that down, as well as an update on some powerhouses that will have some fan bases surprised. We're going to break that all down in this episode of Hattrick HQ. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 72% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening around the NHL with your favorite team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Montreal Canadiens, whoever it is, go down below, hit that free subscribe button, and you get to stay up to date with everything going on around the league. But Casey, let's jump right into it. Dom Luszczyszyn of The Athletic dropped a new article using his model on who he believes had the best offseason thus far. Of course, it's not completely finished. And who's going to have, an impact heading into next season. And again, this was published in The Athletic from Dom Luszczyszyn, and he ranked all 32 teams and where he thinks they landed in terms of, the moves and decisions that they've made so far this offseason. Let's start with number one. We're going to cover some of the teams at the bottom of the list, and I'm going to tease it for later in the video. Some of the teams down there, you're going to be shocked. We're going to break that down. But the San Jose Sharks, it's hard to argue with this one. I would also argue maybe the Islanders could be up here. There's another team we're going to get to in a second that do deserve to be up here. But they made a lot of really interesting moves. Like they're adding Jeff Skinner, a guy who just made the playoffs for the first time and went to a Stanley Cup final for the first time with the Edmonton Oilers. You have Adam Gaudette, good depth player. A couple other good guys I want your thoughts on. Orlov is a very interesting get. And obviously a new backup goaltender in Alex Nedeljkovic, from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Couple names coming out the other way as well, like Mark-Edward Vlasic, who's been there for a long time. What's your take on this? This is a new look San Jose Sharks team, and a youth movement in by way of, Will Smith, Macklin Celebrini. They're going to be an exciting team again this season.
Yeah, Mike Greer really had a great offseason down in San Jose. They needed veterans, they needed defense. And what did he go out and do? Load up on defense by getting Dmitry Orlov, one of the most underrated puck-moving two-way guys, I think, over this past 10 years. I think this guy has been really good during his time in the NHL, especially with the Washington Capitals, winning a cup with them there, I'm pretty sure. And then bringing in a guy like John Klingberg, who got a shot in Edmonton, went to the finals, they ultimately lost. But this is a big get for them on the blue line. That pairing of Orlov and Klingberg is going to be lethal there. Their second pairing behind Ferraro and Liljegren. So it's a really good ad there. I think it's a guy who can, in John Klingberg, who can come in, revamp their power play. Power play was god awful last year. Let's just keep it a buck here. It was bad. So they needed somebody to come in and revamp that and make them a better team. And the thing is, they added a lot of veteran guys here, like Nedeljkovic, who's backing up Yaroslav Askarov, who maybe is the top goaltending prospect right now. So if he does falter in his first full-time minutes as an NHL goalie, you have faith in a guy like Nedeljkovic, who has had starter minutes all throughout his career, and they can really split the starts there. So I think adding a lot of these veteran guys like they did, like Jeff Skinner, is a guy who's going to come in and really benefit off playing with such great playmakers like Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini. It's just only going to make these younger guys even better. And one thing you didn't mention here was they got the number 2 pick in Michael Misa. Will we see him in the mix in this coming season? Who knows? But great offseason down in the Bay Area for sure.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, Michael Misa, didn't even mention him off the top. They just drafted him. Is he going to fit into the plans? We don't know until the preseason, right? We're going to see how he kind of fits into their plans. They also went out and got Ryan Reeves, which I thought was a very interesting move for them. I think it was more of a cap situation than anything else, but the forward group is what it is. They added some interesting pieces, but they're going to let the young guys continue to develop and lead the way. But the defense core, to me, is very interesting. Like you mentioned, Orlov being in the mix there, that's a bona fide top 4 player in your defense core. Klingberg's an interesting one. He has that experience of going to a Stanley Cup final, and he can offer some of that to some of the younger guys on the team. And then you went out and you got Liljegren last year. So the defense is actually pretty good. Muka Medulin has shown some really good, he's taken some steps as well to being an everyday NHLer. And Nicoletti was an underrated pickup, I think, as well from the St. Louis Blues. So it's another guy who can help out. So again, I think it's an interesting one with the San Jose Sharks. And like you mentioned, the power play could use some help, right? So it's going to be an interesting season. And I don't disagree with them being number 1 on the list. But number 2 on the list, this one's a very interesting one. It's the Montreal Canadiens. And, coming in the door is Zach Bolduc from the St. Louis Blues, and a very interesting trade. I want your thoughts on that trade because, honestly, big fan of that for the Montreal Canadiens side of things. Noah Dobson, that's going to be a huge difference maker this year. And yes, a couple players are going out the other way, but nobody of, David Savard, of course, of significance, right? But we knew he was retiring. Christian Dvorak, you can fill that role, I think, and a couple other guys, you can fill those roles, and I feel like you're just getting better with the acquisitions that they made. So how do you feel about the Montreal Canadiens' moves so far this offseason? Because I feel like they've done some really, really good things.
Yeah, and it seems here you only see 2 players coming in with a lot of players going out, but what you're seeing here is a lot of cap walking out the door for the Montreal Canadiens. And obviously, if you can replace David Savard with Noah Dobson every year, you're going to be at the top of the list. That's just the way it goes. I mean, Noah Dobson is probably, I would say, again, one of the most underrated defensemen in the league because, he's kind of been on an Isles team that's always been on the bubble of getting into the playoffs or not getting into the playoffs. So I think getting him I would say a high priority team like the Montreal Canadiens, who has more media focus and stuff on that, we're really going to see Noah Dobson shine here in Montreal. I really like this pickup by Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens. It really solidifies their D-core going into the future with Lane Hudson, David Reinbacher still in the system. You have a lot of young guys now to pair up with Noah Dobson, who you just got locked up for a long time. And like you said, Zach Bolduc was another quality add for this team. And I think going into this season, Montreal, I think, is going to surprise a lot of people. I think they're going to finish ahead of the Ottawa Senators. I think they're going to finish 3rd in the Atlantic this year. This could be a hot take, but when you got such a hot team going into the playoffs this year, finally getting in at the end of the season, they're going to be riding off of that momentum and wanting to get back there. And obviously, you're going to get a full season out of Ivan Demidov now, who really tore it up in the playoffs for this team. So I'm very excited for this Montreal Canadiens team, if you can't tell, this season. And I really like, even it was only 2 or 3 ads that they made. They're very quality ones at that.
Yeah, and I think some of the guys who are still on the team, like in terms of not adding, you have Montembeault, who took a big step last year. Like, he's a starter in this league now, so that's something to be excited about. When you look at the defense, I mean, Matheson and Dobson on your first defense pairing, that's significantly better than what you had last year. And last year you had the Rookie of the Year in Lane Hudson, who has arrived already, and now he's on the second pairing with Goulet. I mean, that's just a little bit unfair at this point as they continue to mature and age, right? So some really good work by the Montreal Canadiens there to shore up the defense in that way. Noah Dobson, you get him locked up long term as well. And Bolduc, I'm actually a very big fan of him, and I wanted to bring him up. Last season, 36 points in 72 games, but he's playing on the 3rd line for the St. Louis Blues. He only just turned 22. Like, this is a player that I think has potential to be a top 6 player on this team. That's kind of what the Habs were looking for this offseason as well. So I think this was a sneaky good move for a player in Mailloux that looked like he was probably going to make the NHL at some point, but you have some other right shot defensemen coming up through the system as well, and Reinbacher, a couple others, right? So I think it was maybe not a necessary move, but a good move. You're a good asset management, I think, in that way. So big fan of him for sure. Any final thoughts on the Montreal Canadiens? Because we're going to move on to some interesting teams that were at the bottom of the list, and those are going to get a little spicy. But any thoughts, final thoughts on the Montreal Canadiens? Puckpedia has Patrick Laine on the 4th line right now. So obviously the lineup is a work in progress, and I feel like they do have a couple more moves up their sleeve before the season starts.
Yeah, I like the backup pickup in Kokkonen or Kokkonen, however you pronounce it. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. I know people hate that, but I think he's a very solid add here for the Montreal Canadiens, where if maybe at times Montembeault does struggle or even he just needs a break, you have a solid guy who has been proven to do it at the NHL level now. And I do like Jakub Dobeš, but I do think getting him more development down in the lower leagues in the AHL or something like that's definitely going to help his development to become the goalie that the Montreal Canadiens want. So I really did like that pickup by not having that pressure on Dobeš like they did last season.
Absolutely. And I think that they have a lot of really good goalie prospects as well, so maybe they look at moving off of one of Fowler as well. They already just traded away Primo as well, so that's something to monitor as we head into the future here. Now, I wanted to get to the bottom of the list, ranked 31st. And the 32nd team, I'm going to have a bit to say about them. So let's get into the Toronto Maple Leafs a little bit. They're not done. Let's keep that in mind. But they're ranked in this model from Dom. And again, go check out the full article. We don't want to give too much away in terms of what's happening in the article. There's some surprises in this, so go check it out. It's going to be in the description. But they added Matias Michelli and Nicolas Waugh, and you lose Mitch Marner. You're losing, at the end of the day, listen, we know everything that came with Mitch Marner, but you're losing a 102-point player that played in all situations. That's not necessarily a good thing, right? So, of course, you have to get over the hump, and we knew that you probably weren't going to win if you were the Leafs with a guy like Mitch Marner around, but you add Michelli, who I think is maybe a diamond in the rough in the league, where he was kind of, he wasn't figuring it out in Utah, but he had some good seasons when they were the Phoenix Coyotes. And then Nicolas Waugh is a bona fide, third line center, which is something the Leafs have also been missing. So how did you feel about the Leafs offseason so far? I don't think they're done. I feel like they're going to do something significant before the season starts, but obviously there's been some significant movement there.
Yeah, like you said, there's something brewing in Toronto. I mean, there's going to be a trade to happen because they just let Marner walk, and they still have some good cap space available to make something work here heading into this season. And I mean, it's maybe a bitter pill to swallow for some, maybe not others, seeing Mitch Marner walk out the door, but I think it had to happen after I seen him screaming at the bench in the playoffs and getting no reaction by anybody on the bench. That kind of spoke volumes to me, where he's saying, okay, this guy needs to get out of here because obviously there's something happening backstage that we're not seeing, from our eyes, watching it here on the couch in the stadium, wherever you're watching it. So I did like what they got back with him in Nick Waugh. I think he, like you said, fits the mold of this Toronto Maple Leafs team, a good third line center to maybe peer up with a guy like Max Domi if you're going to play Michelli on the top line with Matthews. So I think it sucks to see a 102-point player go, but getting two guys like Michelli and Waugh, it really structures this lineup more, and I think that's what they needed. They didn't need one superstar. Well, how many did they got? Three superstars. Now they got two. So, they have their two superstars in Nylander and Matthews, but now they're getting more structure throughout this lineup, more scoring throughout this lineup, and that's something that they've have fallen short of, in my opinion, over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think, one guy that we haven't mentioned either is Matthew Nyes, who I think is just scratching the surface of what he's going to be, and they got him locked up long-term now as well. So if he can add more point production to his game, we know what he brings in the playoffs, which is scoring and that physicality. So I think they'll be okay. I think they do obviously need one more piece, but I don't think you need an 102-point player, and I don't think you want to replace Mitch Marner. You weren't winning with Mitch Marner, so I don't think you want a one-for-one replacement of Mitch Marner anyway. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Final thoughts before we wrap up here. The LA Kings were ranked last, and I totally agree with this one, Casey. I don't know how you feel about it, but my goodness, they made some bad moves July 1st, let me tell you that. Corey Perry's an interesting one. I think that, if you can't beat them, become them. If you're the LA Kings with the Edmonton Oilers, you just can't beat them in the first round every year. So they get Corey Perry. I don't mind that ad. I don't mind that one. But Armia's an interesting one to me. Don't necessarily hate that one. It's just an odd fit. Going out and losing Gavrikov to the Rangers and replacing him with Cody Ceci, Brian Dumoulin, and Anton Forsberg is just... And I know Forsberg obviously doesn't play D, but replacing him with those guys doesn't really make sense to me. And who's coming out the door? Tanner Jeannot. I know he didn't offer much, but Gavrikov is one of the best defensive defensemen. At least definitely the best one on the market this offseason, but in the entire league. And you're losing Jordan Spence. I just some interesting moves. Any thoughts on the LA Kings? Because I feel like they definitely, so far at least, have definitely had the worst offseason.
I mean, I say going into every season that the LA Kings are my dark horse team. I think it's just unlucky that they had to match up with arguably the two best players in the world every single playoff series. So it sucks for them, and obviously it seems like they're letting a lot of young guys go here to bring in those veterans to try to salvage something out of Kopitar and Doughty's last dance. That's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to win one more with the band, and it's kind of coming at the expense of their future here. I mean, Gavrikov is a great player, and letting him walk for a guy like Cody Ceci, who may not hit the net at times, I mean, that's a tough look. I mean, I like the LA Kings. I like their roster. I think they have a very solid roster, and when you look at it, it just reminds me of, wow, they got a lot of two-way guys, and they're a hard team to face, and it's just, I think they need a big goal scorer, I think, is what they're missing. I think they need a guy who can get them 40 goals or 45 goals in a season, and that's what they're missing out. And maybe bringing in some of these veteran guys like Corey Perry and CC, maybe it does help build more of a playoff team. But You still got to get through the regular season at this point and get to the playoffs. I do think that they will do that, but I definitely think there was bigger moves that they could have went after, and they didn't this offseason.
Yeah, and I think that filling in the bottom of your defense pairings with Dumoulin and KC, that's a tough look, especially at those cap hits. I know Dumoulin actually ended the season very well for the New Jersey Devils, but that's tough. You would hope that Brandt Clarke takes a step forward, right? And then the salary cap structure of just the entire team heading forward, if you want to re-sign Brandt Clarke, is just weird to me. It's just weird, the structure that they have going on here. They have to re-sign Laferriere still. He's an RFA at this moment too. Byfield's coming into his own, right? Like, there's a lot to like about the team still, but some of the moves are very puzzling and feel rushed to me. And I think it's because Ken Holland obviously was just hired, and they made a bit of a panic move because they lost to the same team again, which I don't blame them, because we see other teams around the league doing the same thing, but it's going to be interesting to see what they end up
NHL
doing.
25 moves as well, what it looks like to me. I
Definitely.
mean, you're looking, okay, these guys are left, they were good 10 years ago. Maybe we'll give them a shot. That's, kind of seems like it to me at this point.
And I think they have at least 3 defensemen that, scream that to me at least. So it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing the rest of the way and in the regular season. But we want to hear what you have to say about these teams that we mentioned today. Any teams that you think are going to be dark horses this season, and definitely go check out that article, because there are some other surprises in there for sure. So let us know how you feel in the comments, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything going on around the NHL.